A Steinway Model D in a $90 million fintech showroom. 9 minutes to the investor pitch. Then, a single-dad piano tuner walked in, his 7-year-old daughter clutching a wooden metronome carved by her dead mother. The CEO sneered, "This isn't a recital. Take your tools and leave." 9 minutes later, her dying father walked through the door and recognized every note he had played. Sloan Viridian had run her fintech firm for 3 years. That morning, she expected only a polished demo of her new AI music platform and the kind of small showroom problem money usually solves. Then she saw him at the lid of the Steinway, his left hand resting on the fallboard, his right hand suspended above the keys, holding 4 bars no one else in the room could hear. His daughter beside him, the wooden metronome in her palm. She crossed the showroom in 11 strides. She did not call out, she did not signal, she simply arrived. In front of 3 investors, her chief of staff, and the AI engineer, she ended his service contract. He did not argue. He did not raise his voice. He did not finish the 4 bars he had begun. He took Luna's hand and walked out the service corridor. What no one in that showroom knew was that the 4 bars Teo had played belonged to a piece commissioned 22 years ago by the dying man about to walk through the door. Stay with this one. It earns it. To understand what happened in those 9 minutes, we have to go back to a small apartment on the 3rd floor of a brownstone on West 86th Street. The kitchen light came on at 5:40 in the morning. The apartment held 2 people, a man and a girl. Teo Halloran was 47 years old, broad in the shoulders with calloused fingertips that no longer matched his face. His hair had gone silver at the temples in the last 2 years, and he had stopped trimming it. He moved through the kitchen the way men move when they have learned not to wake a child. He boiled water for instant coffee. He set out 1 bowl of cereal and 1 orange. He folded a small navy lunch bag in half and placed it on the counter. Then he sat at the table and read the day's schedule from a paper folded inside his work jacket. 3 tunings, Viridian Sound at 9, a church on 79th at noon, a retired professor in Morningside Heights at 3. The Steinway in Midtown was the only one of the 3 he had not yet touched. The Viridian Sound showroom occupied the 2nd floor of a glass building near Bryant Park. Teo had been hired by the building's facilities manager 4 months earlier on a 6-tuning retainer for the demo piano. He had never met Sloan Viridian. He had been told only that the instrument was a Model D, that it lived in a climate-controlled room, and that the room sometimes filled with investors. He had been told to come and go through the service corridor and to wear a plain navy jacket without any tuning company logo. Viridian Sound was a fintech firm whose new product translated investor sentiment into orchestral phrases. Their pitch deck described the platform as a financial instrument that played. The company had raised $47 million in seed funding 18 months earlier. They had a Series A coming. The Steinway was the centerpiece of every demo. It had to be perfect. Luna Halloran was 7. She had her mother's red-brown hair, cut short at the chin, and her father's quiet. She wore a Navy school uniform sweater with the cuffs slightly worn. She carried a small canvas bag every day, and inside the bag she carried one object that never left her possession: a wooden metronome. The metronome was not battery-operated. It was the old kind, with a brass pendulum and a small wind key on the side. Hannah Halloran had carved it from a single block of cherry wood in the 7th month of her pregnancy, while Teo was in the next room finishing what he believed would be his first orchestral commission. The metronome had a small heart carved into the back, no larger than a thumbnail. Hannah had set it on the windowsill of the nursery the day Luna came home from the hospital. 2 years ago, Hannah had died in a 4-vehicle accident on the Sawmill River Parkway. Luna had carried the metronome every day since. Teo's downstairs neighbor was a retired music librarian named Marta Espinoza. Marta had been the one who walked Luna home from after-school music class every Tuesday and Thursday. She had been the one who sat at the kitchen table with Luna during the long autumn after Hannah's funeral, while Teo went out at 6 in the morning and came home at 8 at night and slept on the couch because the bedroom was unbearable. Marta did not ask questions. She brought lentil soup in a glass jar. She left it in the refrigerator with a note that said only, "Warm slowly." She had known the Hallorans for 9 years. She had known that Teo composed under a stage name. She had never said the name out loud. She had only said, once, when Luna asked her if her father had ever written music, "He wrote one piece, querida. He never finished it. Some pieces wait." The reason Teo Halloran was tuning pianos at 47 instead of finishing the commission Hannah had supported him through was simple, and not simple at the same time. 22 years earlier, Teo had been a final-year student at Juilliard, composition track, with a quiet reputation among the faculty for unusual harmonic patience. He had submitted 4 bars to an open audition for a private memorial commission. The brief had been spare. A man whose wife had died young wanted an original piece for her funeral. The audition asked only for the opening 4 bars. Teo had sent the 4 bars under the stage name T.A. Bram. The committee had selected him. He had walked away from the commission a week later, before delivering anything more, because his own father had died on the same Tuesday morning. He had never gone back. He had told no one in the music world that T.A. Bram was him. The name had simply disappeared. Teo arrived at Viridian Sound at 8:20 in the morning. The service entrance was on the north side of the building. The security guard, a man named Eli who had worked the lobby for 6 years, recognized him and waved him through without scanning the badge. Teo took the service elevator to the 2nd floor. He carried a worn leather case with the tools of his trade: a tuning hammer with a maple handle, 3 sizes of mutes, a small electronic reference tuner he rarely used, a roll of soft cloth. He had walked Luna to school first, holding her gloved hand for the 17 blocks because the weather was cold and she liked the long walk. He had kissed the top of her head at the school gate. She had said, "Will you play today, Papa?" He had said, "I do not play, Luna. I tune." She had said, "Same thing." The showroom had been emptied for the morning tuning. The lights were on the warmest setting. The Steinway Model D sat on a low dais near the south windows, where the late winter light came in through frosted glass at a slow, oblique angle. Teo set his case on a folding stool beside the piano. He removed his jacket and folded it over the stool. He unrolled his cloth. He removed the music desk and the fallboard. He listened. He pressed middle C once, lightly. The note came back warm, but with a faint tremor in the 3rd partial. He pressed A above. He pressed the F sharp below. He stood very still. The Steinway had been tuned 6 weeks earlier by a different technician, and the felt in the dampers had begun to compress in an uneven pattern along the bass register. The 3rd octave was running flat by 8 cents. He set his tuning hammer on the lid and began. Tuning a concert grand is not the work most people imagine. It is not a meter and an adjustment. It is a 40-minute conversation between the hand on the hammer, the ear bent toward the strings, and the wood that has held the tension of 2 centuries of design. Teo worked from the temperament octave outward. He muted the outer strings of each unison with felt wedges and pulled the center string up by a fraction of a cent at a time. He listened to the beat rate between intervals. He moved by feel. The room was silent except for the small ringing of the strings under the hammer's quarter turn. Luna sat on a low velvet bench at the back of the showroom, the wooden metronome on her lap, watching her father's shoulders. She had been told to sit there until 10. Marta had a doctor's appointment. There was no other place for her this morning. By 8:50, Teo had reached the upper treble. He had moved the way he always moved, slow and almost without weight, his ear inches from the strings. He had set down the hammer twice, once to sip water, once to look at Luna and confirm she was still in her place. She had nodded at him, the metronome ticking softly in her hand. She had wound it. He had not asked her to wind it. He had only looked at her, and she had smiled at him with the slow, private smile that was Hannah's. The 3rd octave was now seated. The temperament was clean. He played a quiet chord, hands flat, just to test the bloom of the soundboard. The chord rang. He let it die. Then he did something he had not done in 2 years. He played a second chord, then a third, then 4 bars of a piece he had not allowed himself to think about in 22 years. At 8:56, the showroom door opened. Sloane Viridian came in first. She was 33 years old, dressed in a charcoal coat she had not bothered to remove, her hair pulled back at the nape. Behind her came her chief of staff, a man named Devon. Behind Devon came the AI engineer, a young woman named Priya. Behind Priya came 3 men in dark wool overcoats. 2 of them were partners at a venture firm in Boston. The third was a managing director from a sovereign fund based in Singapore. They had come to see the demo of the new platform. They had not been told there would be a tuner in the room. They walked in mid-phrase. The 4 bars Teo had played hung in the air, unfinished. 3 of the investors stopped on the second step into the room. The man from Singapore set his hand on the back of a chair to steady himself. Sloane Viridian did not stop. She did not register the investors' stillness behind her. She saw a man in a plain navy jacket sitting at her demo piano. She saw a child on her velvet bench at the back of her showroom. She saw a wooden toy in the child's hand. She saw a tool case on a folding stool. She crossed the floor in 11 strides. Teo had already lifted his hands from the keys. He had folded them in his lap. He had stood up by the time she reached him. He did not look at the investors. He looked at Luna. Luna's eyes were very wide. The metronome was no longer ticking. She had stopped winding the moment the room turned. Sloane's voice was low and clipped. The investors heard every word. "This isn't a recital. This is a $47 million pitch. Take your tools and your child and leave the building." Teo did not answer immediately. He bent down and closed the lid over the keys, slowly, so the felt did not slap. He fitted the music desk back in place. He rolled his cloth. He set the tuning hammer in its slot. He latched the leather case. He did all of this in front of the investors, in front of Sloane, in front of his daughter. The way a man finishes a sentence he has started even when he has been told to stop talking. Then he straightened. He picked up the case in his left hand. He held his right hand out to Luna. Luna walked the length of the showroom carrying the metronome. She did not look at Sloane. She did not look at the investors. She looked at her father. She slipped her gloved hand into his. Together, they walked toward the service corridor. Devon, the chief of staff, took a half-step forward. He had been with Sloane for 2 years. He had been at her side through 4 rounds of fundraising and 1 quiet boardroom revolt. He had a habit of noting small things and saying nothing about them. He noted now that the man from Singapore had not moved since the 4 bars had stopped. He noted that the partner from Boston was looking at the floor as if he had dropped something. He noted that Priya, the AI engineer, was watching the tuner walk away with an expression Devon had never seen on her face. He stepped slightly closer to Sloane and said very quietly, "Sloane, the bars he played, I think you should hear them again." Sloane did not turn her head. She said, "We do not have time. Set up the slides." Devon stepped back. Teo and Luna had reached the service corridor by 8:59. The corridor was lit by a single fluorescent strip. There was a service elevator at the far end and a stairwell on the left, and a small alcove where the building's facilities crew kept rolling carts and dust covers. Teo set the case on a rolling cart. He knelt down to Luna's height. He pulled the collar of her wool coat closer around her throat. He said, "Are you all right, sweetheart?" She said, "You played, Papa." He said, "I know. I am sorry. I should not have." She said, "It was pretty. It sounded like Mama's metronome, but slower." He looked at her for a long moment. He did not speak. He took the metronome from her palm and turned it over and ran his thumb across the small heart carved on the back. He remembered Hannah at the round oak table in their first apartment, laughing at his obsession with the metronome on the windowsill. He had told her that the piece would not sit until the metronome did. Hannah had said, "Then carve me one. Carve me one that knows the tempo of waiting." She had carved it herself instead, on a Sunday afternoon in the kitchen, with a small chisel her grandfather had used to make rocking horses. She had set the metronome on the piano at the audition. He had played 4 bars and walked away the next week. Hannah had never asked why. She had only said, "Some pieces wait. We will wait." He had been waiting 2 years longer than she had. He put the metronome back into Luna's palm. He said, "We're going to walk to Marta's now." At 9:01, while Teo and Luna stepped out of the service corridor onto the street, an older man got out of a black town car on the south side of the Viridian Sound building. He was 71 years old, gaunt, wearing a long charcoal coat and a soft wool scarf. His name was Joseph Viridian. He had built the family construction business in the 1980s, sold it in 2008, and become a quiet patron of 2 music conservatories in the years that followed. He had been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer 11 weeks earlier. He had told no one in his family how short the runway was. He had come this morning unannounced because his daughter had not invited him to the Series A pitch, and he had wanted to see her stand in front of her own room. He took the main elevator to the 2nd floor. Joseph Viridian stepped off the elevator at 9:03. The corridor was quiet. The showroom doors were closed. He approached them, and then he stopped, because he could hear faintly through the door the sound of 4 bars being played again. Sloan had not begun the slides. Priya had walked back to the piano. Priya had opened the fallboard. Priya had played the 4 bars Teo had played, from memory, slowly, with one finger. She was trying to show Sloan what she had heard. Joseph stood in the corridor with his hand on the door handle. He did not open it. He listened to the 4 bars. Then he listened to them again, because Priya had begun a 2nd pass. He stood very still. He had not heard those 4 bars in 22 years. He had paid for them and then never received the rest. Inside the showroom, Priya stopped playing. She lifted her hands from the keys. She turned to Sloan. She said, very quietly, "Sloan, I know this piece. I do not know how I know it, but I know it. I think the tuner wrote it." Sloan stared at her. The 3 investors were now seated on the demo couch. The man from Singapore had not spoken since he had set his hand on the back of the chair. The partner from Boston was leaning forward, elbows on his knees. The other Boston partner had taken out his phone, opened a voice memo app, and set it on the coffee table. He said, "Could the engineer play those 4 bars one more time, please? I would like a recording." Priya looked at Sloan. Sloan did not nod. She did not refuse. Priya played the 4 bars a 3rd time. The door opened. Joseph Viridian stepped into the showroom at 9:06. He did not greet his daughter. He did not greet the investors. He walked past all of them, in the slow, careful way of a man saving every step, until he reached the piano. He placed both hands on the closed lid. He said, "Who played this? Just now. The first time. Not the 2nd time. The first time." Priya looked at Sloan. Sloan did not speak. Devon stepped forward. He said, "A tuner, Mr. Viridian. He was working on the instrument. He played a few bars before we began. Sloan asked him to leave." Joseph Viridian was quiet for a long beat. He did not look angry. He looked like a man who had been waiting 22 years for a sentence to finish. He said, "What was his name?" Devon checked his phone. The building had a service log. He read aloud. "Teo Halloran, independent piano technician. He has been on the building's retainer for 4 months." Joseph closed his eyes. He shook his head very slowly. He said, "That is not the name I know him by. The name I know him by is T.A. Bram." Sloan said, "Who is T.A. Bram?" Joseph opened his eyes. He looked at his daughter for the first time since entering. He said, "T.A. Bram is the composer I commissioned in 1998 to write your mother's funeral piece. He sent me 4 bars at the audition. He won. I never received the rest. I have been looking for him for 22 years. I had been told he was dead." The showroom was very quiet. The investor from Singapore closed his eyes. The partner from Boston picked up his phone from the coffee table, ended the voice memo, and slid the phone into his coat pocket. He stood up. He said, "Mr. Viridian, I am sorry. We will reschedule the meeting. This is not the morning for a Series A pitch." The other partner nodded. The man from Singapore opened his eyes and said, "I would like, if it is possible, to receive a copy of the 4 bars before I leave." Priya said, "I can write them out by hand, sir." She walked to the demo screen, picked up a black marker, and wrote the 4 bars on the dry erase margin of the screen in standard notation. She had heard them 3 times. She did not miss a note. Sloane Viridian had not moved. She had not sat down. She was still standing on the second step of the dais, where she had crossed in 11 strides 9 minutes earlier. She watched her father approach Priya at the screen. She watched him reach out a thin hand and touch the 4 bars Priya had written. She watched him trace the 3rd bar with his fingertip. She had never seen her father cry. She did not see him cry now. He did not cry. He only stood with his hand on the bars and breathed slowly. Then he said, without turning, "Sloane, where is he? Where did he go? Where is the tuner?" He remembered then the small chapel on East 63rd Street, where Margaret's funeral had been held. He remembered the empty piano on the chancel. He remembered the program he had printed with no composer name on it, because the commission had never been finished. He remembered the violinist who had played a Bach saraband instead, because there was nothing else ready. He remembered his hand on Margaret's casket. He remembered standing at the chapel door for a long time afterward, listening to the silence where 4 bars should have grown into a movement. And he remembered telling himself that the composer must have died, because no living person walks away from a finished promise. Now he was standing in a glass showroom on the 2nd floor of his daughter's office, and the 4 bars were on a screen in front of him, and the man who had written them was outside on the sidewalk. Devon was already on the phone. He had called the security desk in the lobby. Eli, the guard, confirmed that the technician and his daughter had left the building 4 minutes earlier, through the north service entrance heading east on foot. Devon relayed this to Joseph. Joseph said, "Then we will find him, today, before the day is over. I do not have many days left, Sloane. I would like to use this one." Sloane stepped down from the dais for the first time. She said, "Papa." It was the first word she had spoken since Joseph had entered the room. He did not answer her. He turned toward the door. The investors were already on their feet, gathering coats. Priya quietly tore the dry erase notation off the screen, rolled it, and handed it to Joseph. He put it inside his coat. Joseph Viridian found Teo Halloran at 6:18 that evening, at the front gate of Public School 87 on West 77th Street. Teo had picked Luna up at 3. He had walked her home. He had fed her early. He had gone back to the school for her after-school music class, which ran from 5:30 to 6:15, because Marta was at the doctor's office for a second appointment. Joseph's town car pulled up to the curb across the street. He stepped out. He walked slowly to the school gate. He did not have a coat over his jacket, and the wind was sharp, and Sloane was 3 steps behind him with his coat folded over her arm. Teo saw them when he reached the gate. He did not move. Luna was already inside the schoolyard, walking toward him with her metronome in her hand. Joseph Viridian stopped 2 feet from Teo. He did not extend his hand. He did not introduce himself. He said only, "Mr. Halloran, my name is Joseph. I commissioned a piece from you 22 years ago for my wife's funeral. You sent me 4 bars. I have carried them in my head ever since. I would like, if you are willing, to hear the rest of the piece before I die. I am dying. I have been told a number of weeks. I am not asking you to perform it. I am asking you to finish it. On any timeline, in any room, privately, for me and for her. Teo looked at the older man for a long time. He did not look at Sloane. Luna had reached the gate. She slipped her hand into his. She looked up at Joseph with her quiet eyes. Teo said, "My father died the Tuesday after I sent you those bars. I was 25 years old. I had no one to tell. I did not know how to finish the piece because I had begun it for a man I did not know. And after my father's funeral, I could not bear to sit at the piano for any reason that was not paid by the hour. I am sorry, Mr. Viridian. I am sorry I never wrote you a letter. I should have written you a letter." Joseph said, "You do not owe me an apology. You owe me, if you are willing, the next 16 bars, or 20, or however many you have. You may take as long as you need. I will pay the original commission, adjusted." Teo shook his head. He said, "Not the commission. I will finish the piece because I should have finished it. I will not take the money." Sloane stepped forward then. She had not spoken since the showroom. She was still holding her father's coat. She set the coat over Joseph's shoulders with the careful, unfamiliar gesture of a daughter who had not done that gesture in a long time. Then she turned to Teo. She did not apologize in the way executives apologize, with prepared phrases and offered settlements. She said only, "Mr. Halloran, I was wrong this morning. I did not know who you were. I would not have known even if I had been told. I did not stop to look. I would like to do something useful, if you will let me. I do not yet know what." Teo looked at her without warmth and without anger. He said, "Begin by listening when an engineer in your room tells you what she has heard." Joseph and Sloane did not stay long at the gate. They had been told, by Devon, that the dignified thing to do was to let the family go home. Joseph asked for Teo's address only so that he could send a clean manuscript paper set and a refurbished metronome to the apartment in the morning. Teo refused the metronome. He said, "We have one. It is the only one we need." Joseph nodded. He understood. He said, "Then the paper only." He took a card from his coat pocket and pressed it into Teo's hand. He said, "My number is on the back. Call when the second movement is ready. Or do not call. Either way, I will know. The first 4 bars have already done more than any letter could have." He turned and walked slowly back to the car. Sloane followed 3 paces behind him. That night, Teo walked Luna home along the long way, through the small park where Hannah used to read to her on the green bench under the oak tree. Luna held the metronome in both hands. She held it the way she had held it on the velvet bench at the back of the showroom, with both thumbs on the heart carved on the back. She said, "Papa, did you play today?" Teo did not answer for almost a block. They passed the green bench. They passed the oak tree. They turned onto West 86th Street. He said, "Yes, Luna, for the first time in a long time, baby." She nodded. She did not ask another question. She walked beside him. The street was quiet and the windows above were yellow. The building's stoop light came on as they reached it. He held the door for her. Inside the apartment, Teo set his work jacket on the hook by the door. He hung Luna's coat below his. He washed his hands at the kitchen sink. He boiled water for 2 mugs, one for him and one for Luna with cocoa. He warmed the lentil soup Marta had left in the refrigerator on Sunday. They ate at the small round table by the window. Luna told him about a girl in music class who had played a wrong note on purpose because she was angry at the teacher. Teo listened. He did not give a moral. He only said, "Sometimes a wrong note tells you something true." After dinner, Luna brushed her teeth. She put on her flannel pajamas. She brought him a book of poems from the shelf, the way she had done every night for 2 years. He read to her until her breathing slowed. When Luna was asleep, Teo did not go straight to bed. He walked into the small front room, which had once been Hannah's reading room, and was now the room where the upright piano sat, the piano he had not opened in 2 years. He did not open it tonight either. He sat on the bench. He set his hand on the closed fall board. He breathed. He thought of Joseph Viridian's hand on the closed lid of the Steinway. He thought of Priya writing 4 bars on a dry erase screen from memory after a single hearing. He thought of Margaret Viridian, a woman he had never met, dying young, and a husband sitting in a chapel listening to a Bach saraband because the piece he had paid for had never come. Teo opened the fallboard. The keys were cold under his hand. He did not play. He sat with his palm on the C below middle C. He waited. In the days that followed, Joseph Viridian sent a single packet of high-quality manuscript paper to the apartment. He did not call. He did not send anyone. Sloan did not call either. Devon sent a quiet email to Teo's tuning business address, acknowledging the cancellation of the service contract, paying the invoice in full, and noting that the Steinway in the showroom had been put under a dust cover until further notice. The Series A round was postponed. The investor from Singapore wrote a short personal letter to Joseph, asking to be informed if Mr. Halloran ever consented to a private performance. The partner from Boston commissioned a copy of the 4 bars to be transcribed and framed for his office. Priya, the engineer, left the firm 3 weeks later, quietly, to enroll in a part-time composition program at Mannes School of Music. Teo tuned the upright on the second Saturday after the showroom. He tuned it slowly, over a full afternoon, while Luna sat on the floor with her sketchbook, and Marta sat in the kitchen reading the newspaper. The piano had not been tuned in 3 years. The bass was flat by a quarter step. The hammers had hardened. He worked the way he had worked at the Steinway, slowly and almost without weight. Only this time he did not stop at the temperament. He kept going. He took breaks. He drank tea. He came back. By evening, the upright was singing again, not perfectly, but honestly. Luna placed the wooden metronome on the closed lid. She wound it. She set it ticking. He sat on the bench. He played the first 4 bars, then the 5th, then a 6th that was new. Tick, tick, tick,